Hello there, welcome to Homeland. That's Fisho there, doing the leg squat greeting, or fish for short, or fishy if you feel like it. In this video, we're going to show you how to use an ender pearl stasis chamber with nether portals and redstone gizmos to make a bed spawn or home spawn round trip teleport system that doesn't require another player and that can use different length timers for shorter or longer trips. Meaning, you can take timed trips back and forth from an ender pearl stasis chamber at a base or camp to your bed spawn or the world server's home spawn. This is great for servers that don't have teleports, such as vanilla servers. There are no teleports in the world where we live, and that's why we developed this method. Fisho and me are currently at a base far from home spawn, and we want to be able to go to spawn and back without hours of traveling. You can skip to a quick explanation of what we will be doing with the time-coded link in the description. We play on Homeland Survival, which is a free, public Java Edition server for players who like long-term survival and Minecraft living. The world doesn't reset, and as of today, it's 3 years old. The IP is play.homelandsurvival.net. So here's an example of a basic ender pearl stasis chamber. Stasis chambers suspend a throned ender pearl so it can be activated at a later time. There are other ways of making these. In the past they involved more complicated redstone gizmos, but with 16.2 it's possible to float pearls on soul sand water. There's a lot of great uses for this. For example, at any point, another player could come trigger this pearl for Fisho and bring him back to this place. Reddit user Woopa Boopa recently pointed out that with a daylight sensor and a trapdoor, you can have a chamber that triggers at nighttime. This is great for players who can now go about their chores around their camp during the day without worrying about running home at night. Survivalists know what I mean. You stay out too late trying to make the most of the daylight, and pretty soon mobs start popping up around you and it's a mad dash home to safety. Well, with this, when the sun sets, the trapdoor will smack the pearl and you're back safe near your bed. We're here at the prototype for this round trip teleport contraption. I'm first going to show you how the prototype works so that with this shorter video, anyone can get an idea how to make this. After that, you can click through to the second video where Fisho and I are going to build a new version to walk you through it. So what we are trying to do is have an ender pearl stasis chamber on a timer so that we can die and go to our bed spawn or world spawn and then return to this spot on a timer without needing another player's help. The biggest problem in doing this is that we need to keep this chunk loaded after our death so the timer and stasis chamber can work and bring us back. However, if we die with this chunk loaded, the ender pearl will despawn and won't bring us back when our timer is finished. So here's how I solved this problem. What I've done here is make portals on 2 different overworld chunks whose precise mirrored nether portals are on the same nether chunk. This is possible since 1 block in the nether translates to 8 blocks in the overworld. One overworld chunk with a chunk loader will be used to keep the shared nether chunk loaded for a short time during and shortly after our death. Before our death, we will start another long-term chunk loader on the nether chunk, which will load the overworld ender pearl stasis chamber chunk, but with a delay to allow us to die and respawn before it starts. I'll show you. This is a simple chunk loader that will load the nether chunk on the other side by dispensing items into the portal every few seconds. This isn't necessarily the best loader option for efficiency and server lag, but it's what we're currently using. You can see that items have stopped coming through the portal because the chunk unloaded since we went through the portal and are now in the nether. So on this side, I'm going to start another chunk loader which will load the overworld chunk, and the 2 of them will keep each other loaded long enough for the delayed chunk loader for the stasis chamber to start after our death and respawn. Again, we're doing this so that the chunk with our ender pearl is not loaded until after our death and respawn, so the ender pearl doesn't despawn when we die. Now let's go start our timed ender pearl stasis chamber. In this stasis chamber, the soul sand pushing the pearl up is stuck to a sticky piston, and the piston will move the soul sand once the redstone hopper timer finishes. For this demonstration, it's only set for about 2 minutes, but this setup can go for hours. We'll go through how to build all of this in the next video. Now I'll turn on the chunk loader. This chunk loader is more complicated since it needs to run for as long as we want to set our timer. I've tested it for 12 hours so far. We'll be building all this again in the next video. Now that we're back in the nether, you can see the items have stopped appearing since the overworld chunk has unloaded. But you can see our loader from the other separate overworld chunk is still running. Now we're about ready to do this. Fisho is going to set himself on fire, and before he dies, we're going to start the timer delay for the chunk loader to load the ender pearl stasis chamber chunk. The delay will give Fisho time to die and respawn before loading the pearl chunk, the chunk loader, and the return trip timer. Now, here we are at our bed spawn, and we should be teleported back to our stasis chamber once the chunk is loaded and the timer is run out. Fisho and me will just shear some seagrass to feed our turtles while we wait. And here we are, after an unassisted return trip teleport. So there's a general overview. If you want to now go through the setup in detail, click through to the next video in the description. In that video, we'll be rebuilding everything in a single player world so you can easily see the redstone parts. We'll talk about things like chunk loading, redstone, timers, and show the setup in detail. Then, in a third video, we'll be building this again with a simpler setup on Homeland so you can see the whole process. Two things to keep in mind with this setup. First, once your delay has finished and the Ender Pearl Stasis Chamber chunk is loaded, if you then die, your pearl will despawn and your return teleport won't work, so you need to be careful. Second, if a server resets or crashes, the chunks we are using for this contraption won't load with a reboot, so you'll want to time your uses of this around any server reboots and hope there's no crashes. I can think of two options to address these problems. First, you could leave an alt on the Nether chunk to simplify the setup and keep the Nether chunk loaded regardless of server resets or crashes. And second, if you have friendly players near your base, it's not a bad idea to leave a safe, backup, suspended Ender Pearl so they can bring you back in case something goes wrong. Also, it's important to know that chunk loaders can be prevented on some servers, so before you go too far down the rabbit hole, you'll want to test that. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you all learned something new, and come visit us on Homeland, the world where fish survives.